Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. This is a very common phrase that many of us said when we were children, as we grew up, unfortunately, with this false sense of reality, thinking that that was a true statement. Many of us quickly realized that words can actually hurt. And it's not so much that the words hurt, it's actually the words triggering past unhealed traumas. It creates what I like to call verbal pain. And when we say certain things, that trigger effect happens, and the individual who we said it to, they start reliving some of those past traumas. That's what happened when we are not very conscious of how we communicate with individuals. Our communication is very key because not only can it trigger verbal pain, but it can also trigger really life and death moments. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. Have you ever been in a situation to where you made a statement to someone, whether it was a relative, a friend, coworker, and your statement in your mind you didn't think was actually loaded or you didn't have any pun intended behind it? But all of a sudden you start getting looked at with that side eye from your friend or your relative, and they just seem frustrated, and next thing you know they're saying, well, what did you mean by that? At that moment you're kind of figuring out what's going on, just thinking, did I say something wrong? I didn't intend to. It was nothing I was trying to do to incite this person. But what has happened in that person's mind is that a verbal pain has been triggered by our words, and the person is actually reliving what they have experienced in the past. And we have to figure out a way to really deal with this, because at this moment, a conflict is actually brewing. We're all human, and all of us have had many things that have happened to us over our history of life. And many of the things that have happened are actually traumas. Whether we have actually dealt with the trauma or the trauma is unhealed, those things tend to manifest in the moment when certain words are said. Certain words are trigger words. We're used to that terminology, trigger words. And certain times individuals will say some things and they actually trigger this verbal pain that we actually deal with. Not so much the words hurting, but the pain that is associated with the memory of the past, that past unhealed trauma. So what we have to do is look at this verbal pain. And what do I mean by verbal pain? Verbal pain is basically when somebody says a word that becomes a trigger point that touches the pain that you felt when you actually dealt with something from your past. And in most instances, it is usually an unhealed trauma. So in those moments, we have to come back and we have to think, how do we actually best handle this situation? Because we don't want to actually have this person sitting there and their pain is escalating. We actually have to go through the process in our minds of how can I actually de-escalate this person's pain? I didn't mean to trigger anything, but how can I help them out in this situation? And I think one of the best ways to do that is for us to understand the cycle of conflict. The cycle of conflict simply starts when someone makes a statement. Let's call that person A. So person A makes a statement and person B hears the statement. They take it through the lens of what they have known from their past experience. Now, the interesting thing is that once they process the feeling, person B comes back and responds. Now, this is the very crucial part within the cycle of conflict, because person B can actually choose to continue escalating the conflict, or they can de-escalate the conflict. And they simply do that by either having a negative or positive response. Even though they may be feeling the pain, they can choose a route to say, well, you know what? Let me just not assume so much, and I won't come back with maybe the feelings that I'm feeling right now in my response. So when person B responds back to person A actually hears that statement. And what happens is that the escalation can continue if person A receives that statement, especially if it's a negative statement, and they're receiving, or I should say, they're perceiving that statement, they feel some kind of way about it. So at this point, now person A is starting to feel a little bit in that conflict mode. What happens is that cycle is turning. But we have to always remember that within that cycle, the response of each individual involved in the cycle is where you can either choose to de-escalate or escalate the conflict. we have to say positive things. We have to kind of reframe from saying the things that we want to because maybe we're hurt now, or even the individual that was initially hurt. Don't put that verbal pain even back on person A. Let person A kind of recycle and come back and say, well, I didn't really mean that. That's not what I really meant. And they're explaining what they actually meant. It helps to bring down the level of pain that a person is feeling. So at the end of the day, we want to be able to de-escalate that pain. And we want to be able to say, let's get off this cycle of conflict as soon as possible. And this is not something that you have to sit there and think about tit for tat as you go through this process, but we just have to be aware. That's the biggest part of communication, being aware of what is actually happening and understanding that this person is not feeling the best about what was said. And now we have to train our thoughts. We have to reframe our thoughts and our words so that we can actually help to de-escalate this person's pain. No one wants to be in pain, even verbal pain. And we have to remember that our words actually can hurt.